10 minutes for rebuttal.
Yeah. The way the debate is set up is we both give opening arguments, and then we respond to what the other person said. I cheated that a little bit, because I just couldn't help it. When he came with this Matthew 13. So I will spend the rest of the evening taking apart the argument that has been made, only because it's what we're going to do for the next few hours. I don't think, again, the point is that I don't have to make the argument. Chris has to make the argument for the point of the debate, but for the edification of us all, I will do what I can do in all of this. Chris didn't respond to the fact that he uses hell flippantly. It seems incongruent with his real belief on it. He's a passionate, principled man who then makes light of the most serious topic that he says he holds to. That's not a personal critique. That is a statement about the fact that sometimes our system tells us that we have to say we believe things, even when it becomes very difficult for us. Chris made the statement early on in his opening part this afternoon, and I apologize that you didn't have a chance to hear this. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say right there. Chris sets up this binary dilemma in his statements earlier about how we're going to approach the scriptures. They could be metaphorical, he says, and referred to as if metaphor is somehow weaker. And then comes with the rebuttal moment here and says, metaphor is just as powerful. That's what I've been going to be saying all night. Metaphor doesn't mean it's not true. We shouldn't use the phrase just a metaphor. It's not just a metaphor. It very simply is a metaphor. Secondly, a parable is not a metaphor. A parable is a parable. In our English language, we can say, oh, parable is just metaphor. It's not just a metaphor. It's a parable. Any of you who have read any other parables in the English literature know that. In first century Judaism, a parable wasn't seen as a metaphor. Point I'm making, there would be nothing wrong with Jesus explaining a parable with a metaphor. The passage that he read, the Matthew 13, he cut one verse out. I'm not saying it was deliberate. I would have done the same thing if I was making his point. The verse that he didn't focus on was after, and the weeds will be pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. This is in the literal explanation section. So the Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out the kingdom, everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them in the fiery furnace, a literal fiery furnace, explaining the earlier parable. Chris wants us to believe, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, which he says is literal. People are going to have teeth, and they will have tear ducts. Fair enough. Then the next phrase is, then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The next line, then the righteous will shine like the sun. That is a metaphor. So either you believe what Chris is saying, that with a parable you cannot explain a metaphor, or you say, we will all be like suns shining. And not like a sun, literally a sun shining. So he's going to pick on the Mormons for their idea that you get to be the god of your own planet, but then is going to say you, because of the textual way of reading Matthew 13, and it cannot be metaphoric, has to mean you will shine like a sun. And that doesn't mean like a sun in a metaphoric way. That means you have to be a sun just as the fiery furnace has to be the fiery furnace. So either the argument is there literally is a fiery furnace and you literally are going to shine like the sun, or Jesus is doing something else. And I would suggest very clearly Jesus is doing something else. And what he's doing is righteous and beautiful and great. And I agree with him all the way. This is going to be a funny thing for some of you, that you hold my view on this thing. You've never met someone like Chris, and you're going to say to yourself, "Guy believes the Bible? Man, that seems strange to me. Never heard somebody talk like that who believes the Bible." Or for maybe an off chance, there's one of you who would view it the other way around. Is it interesting that this powerful philosophy, doctrine, unshakable, is found in the way that we had to find it. Now, can you read Matthew and find that those who do not live in congruency with God are living as if they are opposition to God, and God will do something about that someday? Absolutely, you're going to find that. Is the way God's going to deal that, put them in a place, rather than make them a part of the healing of all of creation? Our argument, when we're being real guys and not debaters, is not about is there a place, it's about what's the role of punishment. And so then we're going to have to talk about, if we can do it tonight or not, I don't know, we're going to have to talk about what wrath means. We're going to have to talk about God's overall intention for all of the cosmos is. And it's in that story that it fits. Truthfully, the story of God does not have to fit into the stream that Chris has chosen to participate in. It is not subject to the stream of theologians that he chooses to listen to. Nor is it subject to my stream. We are both doing something with it all the time. And I will tell you regularly tonight that I am one who holds what I believe in as open-handed way as I can, trying to recognize when possible that what I'm talking about right now is something that I think, because this is how I was led to think about it, and sometimes chose to think about it. And I have to say, in rebuttal, and we'll say it a bunch of times, and we've said it personally, I don't think Chris does that. I think Chris says that he comes to it objectively and only occasionally selectively. Actually, I feel that he moves sort of between, I'm just a guy from California, what do I know, it's not me, the interpreter, but then he stands up and says, I will tell you precisely what this means. He's stuck in the place between, is he the authority that you listen to explain these things, and is the explanation just simply an objective process, or is Chris actually affecting the very explanation that he's giving? And I would say, as a postmodern deconstructionist, that's exactly what he's doing. And what we should do is show that to one another when we do it, so that people can say, and I still want to follow your way of thinking. It doesn't get any weaker. Now, I will ask Chris later, and I don't think it's fair to sort of spring questions on him later. I'm going to ask him if there are any church fathers with whom Chris disagrees. You already know the answer. Of course there are. There's some things they've said that he wouldn't hold to. I'm going to ask him, are there any church fathers who would disagree with what he believes? He would say, of course there are. There have been. So now we're not dealing with a man who is simply in the stream of what everyone has thought all along and no one's ever varied from it. Now we're listening to an argument made by somebody who says, this is how my people think about these things. And to feign objectivity gets me a little revved up sometimes, because I think that it's not particularly helpful. The problem is not that Chris is a full-time literalist. The problem is that on certain doctrines, Chris has to become a literalist. The argument made earlier today that speaking of hell is not in vogue is simply out of touch with reality. Even though your churches don't talk about it and laugh about it, try to say that you don't believe it, and see how fast you will be brought into proper thinking. Right orthodoxy. Try to vary a bit. It could be that he is just the pirate Christian radio guy that's on the outlying sides, and he's trying to hold it all together, and he's the only one telling the truth. Where in honesty, this is the accepted view of most churches, even though they have not thought about it. It just simply is the doctrine that people have been handed, and we've chosen to deal with it in our own ways by keeping quiet, by digging in deep, or by sometimes having to laugh it off. I have 30 seconds left, but I will give that to the time gods.